Clement Chartier, de Métis Nación, quien presentará los puntos de vista de la coalición de naciones y organizaciones indígenas. Señor Chartier, tiene usted la palabra.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, we can.
Indigenous peoples throughout the Americas have suffered the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic. As states roll out measures to bring their economies back to normality, this cannot and must not be done without the active participation of Indigenous peoples. States must make provisions in their budget allocations directed to Indigenous peoples in amounts sufficient to enable us to reestablish our capacity to generate economic activities affected by the pandemic. While making monetary provisions to enable Indigenous peoples to rebuild our economies, it is also important that those countries that can afford it provide vaccines to countries less fortunate that must then identify Indigenous peoples as a priority. Until Indigenous peoples throughout the Americas are vaccinated, we will remain at risk and economic recovery will be next to impossible. We call upon state governments and the OAS to make space and real participation within the machinery of the OAS and the Summit of the Americas for Indigenous peoples. In this call for inclusion and accommodation, we rely on the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We do not accept being categorized as civil society. Rather, we must be respected as the original peoples of this continent and accorded our rightful place within the OAS, including within the meetings of the OAS and its subsidiary organs. We should not have to compete with civil society in order to have a voice at the General Assembly or at other meetings of the OAS. We are also concerned that the OAS efforts to give life to the declaration through the 4-year plan of action adopted in June 2017 has run its 4-year mandate without having reached its objectives. In light of the pandemic and the greater need for an action plan for implementation of the declaration, we urge this sitting of the Assembly to extend the plan of action for another 4 years or more, along with increased initiatives and measures to ensure its success. In this sense, we encourage all member states to contribute to a fund to enable the OAS to do its work and that the plan is in fact carried out. Further, we call upon the Secretary General to set up a process of engagement between Indigenous peoples and member states in order to explore mechanisms necessary to drive Indigenous peoples' direct participation within the OAS, as well as initiatives to promote the declaration and implementation of a renewed plan of action, including ongoing consultation with Indigenous peoples. In closing, we thank His Excellency, Secretary General Almagro, for participating in 2 virtual interactive meetings with the American Council of Indigenous Peoples in April and September of this year. Merci, gracias, thank you, merci.
Muchas gracias.